Hi there. Welcome back to my channel, Learn Java with Gaurav. In continuation to my previous video about Java Virtual Machine, in this video, I'll be talking about class loader subsystem that is an important part of JVM architecture. In my previous video, we already discussed at a very high level about the JVM architecture. So you can watch my previous video in order to understand the subcomponents and how it interacts with each other in order to process the bytecode that is provided as an input to JVM. In this video, we will be covering below topics. Class loader subsystem itself is a three-step process, which includes loading, linking, and initialization. So we will be covering these three topics as part of this video. And in the end, we will be covering a special type of an exception which gets generated whenever a loading fails. So we'll be discussing about these two types of exception and error. One is class not found exception and no class def found error. Let's first understand what exactly happens whenever a JVM is started. So whenever we run a command from command prompt and say, let's say Java, your class name. So a Java instance is created, and as part of the Java instance creation and startup process, the initial class gets loaded into the memory. And along with actually the initial class, there are other runtime classes that are actually required in order to run the entire application that also gets loaded using the Bootstrap loader. So we will discuss about the Bootstrap loader in few other slides. Then the initial class is linked. So we'll discuss about the linking process as well. Once the linking is done, the initial class gets initialized, and once the initialization is done, then JVM invokes the static void main method of the initial class. So this is again one of the important questions that are asked in the interview, that who actually invokes the static void main method, and it is the JVM. And as part of the startup, the JVM actually invokes the static void main method. So the responsibility of class loader subsystem is to actually look for a class, and once the class is found, then load that particular class into memory so that it can be used for further processing. So class loader subsystem, in order to do that set of things, to load that class into memory and to initialize the class so that it can be used for further processing, is done by these three set of processes of loading, linking, and initialization. So what about the java.lang package? So we write a lot of program and we use some classes that are coming as part of this particular package of java.lang, let's say string, integer, and all those classes. So who actually loads those set of classes? This is a question. So let's look for an answer when we'll be discussing about the loading phase of class loader subsystem. So as part of loading actually finds for a particular class. So it looks for a binary representation of a class. So when we say binary representation, it is the bytecode or the dot class file. So it looks for a specific class file in the in the hard disk, and it loads the information of that class into memory. So for every dot class file, JVM actually stores the information of that particular class file into the method area of uh, the runtime data areas of JVM. So we'll discuss about the what type of information actually gets stored as part of this loading process. So in the next slide. Once the dot class file is loaded into JVM, then JVM actually creates a class object. So a class is java.lang.class object to represent the dot class file that is loaded into the RAM. So whenever you will try to create a object with using a new constructor, so that information to create an object for that particular class is actually stored in the class object of that particular class. So the class object is created by JVM in order to represent the physical dot class file into the memory. So this is the set of information that is actually stored as part of the class loading process. So the class file actually contains a bytecode, set of bytecodes. Along with the bytecode, it also contains some metadata, some information which actually represents, which actually gives us some extra information about the class file. So a basic class file looks like this, and it contains the set of information as part of the bytecode. It contains a magic number, which actually is something that helps the JVM to identify whether the file is corrupted and it is not modified after the compilation. And it also gives us some information about the major minor version. This will help the JVM to understand which version of the compiler is used to compile this class and whether it is compatible with the JVM version or not. It also contains some other information like who is the superclass, what is the this class, instance count, what are the different fields and methods and all those stuff. The thing that we are interested in is the constant pool. So this is a data structure that actually contains the metadata about the class. By metadata, I mean all the references, all the classes and the objects that are being referenced inside the class file. So this constant pool is actually of type CP underscore info. And if you see CP underscore info itself contains a set of tags. And these are the set of tags which it can hold and other information as part of the array. So whenever a dot class file gets loaded into the memory, JVM actually creates a runtime constant pool. So this runtime constant pool is actually part of the method area of runtime data areas. So the runtime constant pool for every class is generated by this constant pool field from the class file. So the constant pool table is a binary representation of the class or the interface is used to construct the runtime constant pool uh, whenever the class is getting created. So this is the information that actually gets stored as part of the loading process. So let's actually see an example of a class and the a class file and the information that is generated as part of that class file. I have created a class, demo class, which contains the static void main method. And in this method, it actually creates an object of student class, and the student class is just created below it, which contains a private member name and a setter and getter for that field. We just create a new object, set a name, and try to print the name of the object which we have set. So we'll just try to compile this Java file and try to see what is the bytecode that is generated for this Java file. Okay, so let's run the command to compile the Java file, that is java c demo class.java, and it is compiled fine. So let's to open to read the bytecode. There is an option, so you can run java p with the verbose option in order to open the class file to read the bytecode. So just run this command, and it will print a lot of information. So let's go over the information that it has just now printed. So we talked about the magic number, and this is the checksum that we talked about. To this helps us, the helps the JVM to understand if the file is properly compiled and it is not corrupted. We also see the major minor version and also some flags that helps to identify what are the access specifier of this class. This is the constant pool. So we'll come back to constant pool in just a few minutes. So let's go down to the code which actually it is written in this is the bytecode which contains the JVM instructions. It includes a lot of instructions that are only understandable by JVM, like invoke special, a load, new, invoke special, and LDC. All these instructions that you see, these are JVM instructions. And along with these JVM instructions, you will see these numbers with hash. So these numbers that you see are the symbolic references. And these are the symbolic references which actually gets replaced as part of the linking process. So we'll talk about this in the linking process. But to understand what exactly is a symbolic reference, let's take an example where let's see what exactly is hash 6. Okay, so you will go to the constant pool and look for hash 6. So this is the hash 6. It says field reference and it further refers to another number of 23 and 24. So if you go to 23 and 24, it says a class and name and type. So and 23 it again refers to 32. So you will go to 32 and it says java.lang.system. And for 24 it says 33 and 34. So you will go to 33, it is out, and 34 it is java.io.printstream. So basically these references are actually pointing to the constant pools and how these references can be actually resolved at the runtime when it gets loaded into the system. So now that we have seen an example of a class file and what are the different instructions that are present as a part of the class file in the bytecode, we also understand about the symbolic references that are present in the bytecode along with the JVM instructions and how those symbolic references points to the flags in the constant pool. Loading actually creates the class object of that particular class. So the physical memory, physical file is now represented into in the JVM using a class object. So this is an example to demonstrate how exactly you can retrieve some information from the class object. So this is an example where we have created a student class and this get class method can give you the class object of that particular class. So from this particular class object, you can either get the name, different declared fields, and even you can get declared methods from that. This is the output of the program where you can see these are the different declared fields and the different declared methods of the class object. So now let's discuss about the different types of class loader that we have with us. So there are two types of class loader. One is Bootstrap class loader, and the others are the user-defined class loader. The Bootstrap class loader is a class loader which is written in the native language like C and C++, and we cannot override the functionality that comes as part of Bootstrap class loader. We also have the user-defined class loader. So the other two class loaders that you see over here, the extension class loader and application, or we also call it system class loader, are the two user-defined class loaders. These two class loaders are actually written in Java, so you can actually go ahead and check the classes that are actually loading the classes. So ext class loader you can see is the extension class loader and app class loader is the application class loader. Any user-defined class loader actually needs to have a base class of class loader so that it can use the native function which are actually going to load the classes and load the classes into memory and use the references in order to work with the classes. JVM actually follows the delegation hierarchy principle. So you must have heard about the inheritance in object-oriented programming, but in inheritance, actually, what happens is that the child class always get a preference over the parent class. So anything that is defined in the child class will get a preference. But the delegation hierarchy principle is the just opposite of that. So it works this way, that let's say if a class is asked to be loaded into the memory, so the call first goes to the application class loader. An application class loader does not do anything, and it simply delegates the call to the extension class loader. Extension class loader also does not load the class, and it delegates the call to the bootstrap class loader. And the bootstrap class loader is the parent class loader, you can say. Now, the bootstrap class loader is the one which will actually first initiate to try to load the class into memory. If the bootstrap class loader finds the class into the path where the bootstrap class loader looks for the classes, it will load the file into the memory. Otherwise, it will delegate back to the extension class loader. Now, the extension class loader will look for the class at this particular path, jre/lib.ext, and if it finds the class at this particular path, then it will load it into the memory. Otherwise, it will again delegate the call to application class loader. Now it is the task for the application class loader to load the asked class. If the application class loader finds the class at the path defined by the class path, so you can define the class path by simply passing -cp as the command line option along with the Java command, or you can just define the class path variables to provide the exact path where you're defining the system classes or the other references that you're providing as part of the application. So now the application class loader will actually try to load that particular class into memory, and if it finds the class, it will load it into the memory. Otherwise, it will now throw java.lang.class not found exception, because the class loader could not find the asked class that needs to be loaded into the memory. So now is the time to answer the question that who actually loads the java.lang package into the memory, and it is the bootstrap class loader. So all the runtime classes that are actually part of a few of them are part of rt.jar that comes as part of the GRE. So all the runtime classes that are required to run the Java applications are loaded by the bootstrap class loader into the memory. So if you are writing any program for, let's say, creating a string object, so that string class is loaded by the bootstrap class loader. Now let's talk about the linking process. So as part of the class loader subsystem, the second phase is a linking phase. So now the class is already loaded into the memory, and the class object is created. As part of the linking process, the bytecode that is loaded into the memory is verified, and it is prepared for further processing. And optionally, it is also resolved. So resolution is something that is optional, and as part of resolution, the symbolic references that we saw in the example of the bytecode, that those symbolic references are actually replaced with the actual references in the memory. So, based on the different Java app implementation, JVM implementations, the linking and the loading process policy would be different. So, it can either be a lazy or the eager way of doing it. So, let's take an example of the eager resolution that as soon as the class is getting loaded, all the references attached to that particular class will also get loaded and resolved at that particular time. And the other way of doing it is with the lazy loading, and this lazy loading is something that waits till the point the reference is about to be invoked. So till that point, the resolution and linking is not done. So it depends on the different JVM implementation that how the linking and loading processes are being done. So let's talk about the three phases of linking. First is the verification phase, and in this verification phase, it actually verifies the binary representation, the bytecode of the class, to check whether it is structurally correct, to check whether someone has corrupted the file or not, and if it finds any issue with the class file, it throws java.lang.verify error as part of the linking. The other phase is preparation. So as part of preparation, the class is the class level variables, the static fields are provided with the default values, and they are not provided with the actual values that we have set. So let's say we have a static field, which is a static integer field which is initialized to a value 30, but at this particular time, where at the preparation stage, the integer static integer value will be initialized with the value of 0. So the actual value of the static field will be set in the initialization phase. So if the resolution is required, the resolution takes place, and resolution is actually it depends on the JVM instructions. So these are the set of JVM instruction that actually uh, tells that the resolution is required, and all the symbolic references that were being referenced in the bytecode now gets replaced with the actual references from the runtime constant pool. So this is the part of resolution that helps actually to create the entire linking with the actual objects in the memory at the runtime. Then comes the final phase of the class loader subsystem, and that is initialization. So once the class is loaded and is linked, so before initialization, the class should be loaded into the memory and should be linked properly and resolved so that it can be initialized. And as part of initialization, the initialization methods of the classes and the interfaces are invoked. So the default constructors or the static blocks gets invoked, and all the values that are set to the, let's say for the static variable we discussed, are set at this particular stage. So any integer value or any static field with an integer value of 30 is being set, it will be set at this particular phase of class loader subsystem. The final thing that we should also keep in mind whenever we are talking about class loader subsystem are these two types of exception that it can generate. So we already saw an example that as part of loading, if the class is not found by the class loader throws an exception of class not found. So any requirement to load a class, and if the class is physically not found at the paths that are specified to the class loader, it will throw class not found exception. But there are cases when the classes are compiled fine, and when the classes are getting loaded into the memory, one of the reference classes are not found. So let's say we have an example of class A, which is being referenced by class B, and at the compile time, class A was present and class B compiled fine. But at the runtime, when class B was getting resolved, in the constant pool of class B, there is a reference to class A, and now it's a time to load class A into memory. And let's say for any reason A is not present, and it is not able to get loaded into the memory. So at that particular stage, the JVM will throw the no class def found error, uh, and the cause for that particular error would be class not found exception. So let's take an example and see how we can actually generate a no class def found error in order to understand this error and exception. I have taken the same example as I've mentioned in the slide, that we have, let's say, two classes, class A and class B,
and class B is somewhere or the other referencing to class A. So let's try to compile these two Java files and check the bytecode for these two files first. I'll just open the compiler and run the command to compile the files. So I'll run b.java. Okay, so the codes are compiled fine. So now let's check the bytecode for this class file java p hyphen v b.class. So this is the bytecode for this, and if you will see somewhere here that hash 2 and hash 2 class is pointing to 15 and 15 goes to class A. So this is how in the bytecode for class B there is a reference to class A. And if you will try to run this class now, let's try to run this class B and it runs fine. So although I have not printed anything as part of this, but it runs fine and it does not gives you an error. So let's now try to remove this file class A from the memory from the disk and now try to run the same program. Now at the runtime it will not be able to find the class. So as we saw in the bytecode of class B that there is a reference to class A and now it is not able to find the class at the runtime. So it is giving us class not def found error because the class was not found. So such situations where the classes are present at the compile time but it is not present at the runtime, it will give you a no class def found error. And if the class itself is not found, it will give you class not found exception. That's it from my side on class loader subsystem. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please do subscribe to my channel. I'll be posting other videos on JVM architecture, so stay tuned.